I was working as night security for a small office at a sanitation plant. The building had a single entrance, and you had to check in at the security station to get in or out. So, a worker shows up and checks in, saying he needs to take care of a few things and grab some stuff. So I check in his ID and flip a few lights for him, and then go back about my business. Fast forward a few hours, and my shift is about to end, but I still haven't seen the guy come back. So I go patrol the building to find him, and literally can't find him anywhere. He's not in any of the areas where I turned the lights on for him. No other lights have been flipped on, and he's not in any of the other rooms. I stopped by security to see if we maybe just missed each other and he's trying to leave, but nobody's there. I do a second patrol, and still, no signs. At this point, I went to check the cameras to see where he went, but he's not on a single camera, except for the one covering the entrance and security station. He turns down a hallway and just never shows up on the next camera down the hall. At this point, I logged it as an incident and got out of there right as the relief shift showed up. The next day, my boss calls me and says that the worker had been on vacation out of state for several days and wouldn't return for several more. Nobody could offer any explanation to what happened. I used to work as an overnight manager at Walmart from 2011 to 2014. A lot of my work was done patrolling the back rooms, making sure stock was correct and checking if anyone was stealing anything or slacking off. There was this one long hallway, with one exit on both ends, freezers on one side, and no windows. Now, working overnight, you see your fair share of spooks and weirdos. But this hallway, Jesus. Every now and then while working on one side, I'd glance at the other and see a tall, older white guy lock eyes with me, then turn and walk straight into and through the wall. Other nights, while working, I'd hear a loud thud and glance over and see something from the shelves on the floor. And it wouldn't be anything light. Boxes of detergent, packs of water, stuff that doesn't just tip over. A few times, the PA speaker overhead would either make a loud pop and fizzle out, or just click on, as if someone was using it, and make the absolute most slight gurgling and mumbling sound, then end with a sharp static. The one thing that got to me, though, was this weird feeling of absolute dread while walking down the other, mostly unused end by myself. It was this genuine horror, as if I was being watched, and this uncontrollable panic that made me jump at the slightest sound. I had heard similar stories from other workers, but my favorite was from this sweet old black lady. Whenever I brought it up, her face went from joyful and careless to just deadpan. And she said, Let's not bring him up. But the kicker. The store's not that old, so luckily I had a buddy who had worked there from day one. I asked him if anyone had ever died on site. Apparently, a few may have kicked it in the parking lot or in an ambulance after leaving the store. But one man, a tall, older guy, had a heart attack in the back rooms. I was a cargo pilot trying to build hours. I was flying late at night as usual to get back to base. The plane we were flying used to be a passenger plane in the 80s and 90s, but was converted to carry cargo. This means that all the seats, the lavatory, galley, fixtures, flight attendant control panels, and all those things were ripped out long ago, leaving nothing but an empty tube with cargo nets and a life raft. It was just me and the captain on board, and we were both on the flight deck. It was a dark night out, and we couldn't see the moon. Something happened earlier in the flight that was so insignificant, I don't even really remember what it was that happened. Like a bumping sound from the cargo area. But when I mentioned it later, the captain made a remark like, "Oh, that's just the ghost of the old flight attendant who used to fly on this plane." Completely jokingly. Less than 15 seconds later, the flight attendant call notification rang and lit up in the cockpit. It's basically a lighted switch with a sound that notifies the cockpit that the flight attendant is trying to talk to us. Except, like I said, the flight attendant panel was ripped out years ago. There's no way to activate the call button, and we were the only two people on board the plane anyways. The call button eventually went out, and we proceeded to get spooked, but landed normally with no other incident. It was probably just some loose wires and coincidence. But that was quite a coincidence. In my mid-20s, I worked with dementia patients who were bad off enough that they need 24-hour care, but not bad enough to go into a home. I'd frequently get the night shift, and ended up spending the night in a lot of patients' homes, which tended to be of the old and creaky variety. On one such shift, I ended up accidentally dozing off on the couch. I woke up suddenly, and there was a little girl right in front of me. She looked to be around 4 or 5. I figured that her parents must be around somewhere in the house, and I just didn't notice them come in. I picked the little girl up and started looking for them. And while I was walking, I passed by a mirror. Only, it wasn't me in the reflection. It wasn't me holding the child. It was an old woman with waist-length, long white hair and a vivid scarlet dress. I set the child down on a chair to get a closer look and started freaking out as the older woman continued to copy my movements. I turned back around to get the kid and get out of there, but the child was gone. I left the house and raced across the street to my car on the other side and started fumbling for my keys. There was a full moon out, and the trees above were casting the car in all sorts of strange branching shadows. Suddenly, I heard a snap behind me, and in an instant, I woke up, for real this time, and for a split second, I could see the same child from the beginning, standing beside the couch, right in front of me. Then, it was just me, alone in the darkness again. The next morning, when I was preparing to leave, I noticed the same hallway that I'd been walking through in the dream. There was a full-length mirror, and a chair right beside it, with a doll sitting in it. The doll looked just like the child. I have no idea what the woman in red was about, since my patient was a man. I work the night shift at McDonald's, and I 100% believe my store is haunted. This one night, I'm wearing the headset to joke around with the guy taking orders, and making the orders as he takes them. We get one for a crispy buttermilk meal with a large high C, and I get it done fast. About a minute later, I'm waiting at the window, and I know the other guy is slow, so I'm not surprised the car still isn't there. I stick my head out to see how it's going, and there is no car. I ask, "Hey, where's Crispy Buttermilk?" "I don't know. They didn't pay." Sometimes cars will pull up to the second window instead of the first because they're idiots. So I ask, "Well, where are they?" "Dunno. They never drove up." The headsets beep if someone pulls up or reverses out, but I couldn't see any car on the security camera. It's like the car mysteriously disappeared between placing their order and driving to the first window. No one ever came back for the crispy chicken meal. I told this to a coworker later, and she just nodded and told me, "Yeah, that's the ghost. It's hungry." I have a few more stories as well. We ran out of fries during the middle of the night, and I had to go into the freezer to get some more. The freezer is a dark, slippery place with only one door. The door has no handle, so you have to push on it directly and hope you don't get frostbite. So I'm in the corner with my back to the door, and I can feel the freezer dripping on me, which it's definitely not supposed to do. Suddenly, I hear the door slam. You literally cannot slam the freezer door. It's so heavy, most of the girls have to get a guy to open it for them. I go to bring out the fries, and the door is locked. The freezer door can't be locked. Only the fridge area it opens up to can. I start panicking, and start banging on the door and screaming. Finally, a coworker comes to get me because I'm taking forever to get the fries. He let me out, and no one believed I was locked in the freezer. I still refuse to get things out of there. This other time, I was wearing the headset again. There were no orders, so the order taker was washing dishes while I was messing around on my phone. Suddenly, I heard a voice on the headset. It sounded like a younger woman. I didn't get a ding, but I figured they might not be pulled all the way in. I ignored it at first, but I kept hearing the voice. It said, "Let's go outside." It was clear as a bell, and sounded like a little girl's voice. I asked my coworker, "Dude, did you hear that?" "Yep." Then the voice said, "Let's play." I grabbed the manager and told her there was a woman on the headset talking. The manager was the only woman on shift, and speaks in a heavy Spanish accent. There was no car on the security camera, and all headsets were accounted for. The voice started again, and I handed the headset to the manager for her to hear. She was shocked, and thought we were screwing with her. I took the headset back, unsure of what to do. And when the voice came on again, I tried to hand it back, but the manager shoved it away, saying, "No, it's haunted." She said something in Spanish, too. Finally, a customer came in, and the voice stopped for the rest of the evening. The three of us who were on that shift are still kind of messed up about it. I have a buddy in the army who was in Kandahar around 2010. His battalion was preparing to mount a recon expedition in the neighboring Arghandab district. They were about to cross the river when someone in the unit said he could see an old lady washing bloody fatigues in the river. They very much had to know why she had them. My buddy, an interpreter, a lieutenant, and a couple of others dismounted to have a look around. Sure enough, there was an old lady kneeling by the river, washing bloody desert camo and sobbing hysterically. The interpreter said something to her, and she looked up, gathered the camo, and darted off behind a hill. They went after her because they needed to know who got killed and why she had their stuff. They split up and went around the hill from both sides, and when they met in the middle, she wasn't there. They looked around and found no footprints except their own. They headed back and had to admit she got away without any explanation as to how or where she went. They continued with their recon mission, and the lieutenant got blown up by an IED about 3 hours later. A few years after I heard this story, I happened to be researching Irish folklore. Turns out, there's something called the Morrigan that appears as an old lady washing your blood-stained armor. And if you see her, it's important that you're about to die in battle. I was working on a transport ship in the middle of the night off the coast of Norway. I was sitting on the bridge talking with the captain and a couple of the crew. The weather was pretty bad, and it was raining hard. We were playing cards when suddenly we heard a blip, blip, blip. Something was up on the radar. The captain got on the radio and received no response. There were big pings on the radar, indicating at least a 40-meter vessel. The captain blew the horn, and again, we received no response. No sound, no lights, nothing. He called into the Coast Guard, who told us there was no traffic in our area besides us. The radar signature was moving around, and everyone was looking out the windows of the bridge. No one could see anything. I went outside with 2 other guys. It was raining and windy, and suddenly we heard what sounded like an old ship's bell. I heard the loud sound of flapping sails. Then, nothing. We freaked out, went inside, and knocked on wood. The captain didn't even ask. He just said that the radar signature was gone. I recently started working at an upscale grocery store in one of the oldest cities in my country. So, the manager leads me into the basement on my first shift where all the employee locker, bathrooms, and break rooms are. The basement is really creepy. Something just looks and feels incredibly off about it. I'm training with another employee and ask him during a slow period if the building is haunted. Oh yeah, definitely. This building was originally a slave market, you know. He talks about how the basement is an old dungeon for the slaves, and if I look around closely enough, I'll be able to see where all the holding cells originally were. Apparently, our break room is itself an old holding cell. He then proceeds to talk about how they've gone through about 5 general managers in the past year because they kept quitting after seeing and hearing disturbing things after hours. He tells me that if I don't believe in ghosts now, I will after working there for long enough. The store has an unfortunate closing system where no one is required to help each other. Once you've cleaned up your own stuff, you can leave. My station always takes the longest to close, so I'm stuck an additional 30 minutes or so after everyone else has gone home. I always have to go into the dungeon by myself at night to change, and sometimes my coworkers don't even leave the lights on for me. I haven't even seen anything yet, except after I close my locker, I always get a chill and feel an instant need to bolt upstairs. A security guard who checks our bags says the ghosts are trying to tell us to get out by spooking us like that. Last night, a new girl was working in a nearby station and offered to help me close. Finally, I have someone to go into the basement with me. We get changed and go upstairs to clock out. We're casually talking by the clock-in screen, when suddenly, we hear an agonizing scream of a man that was slightly muffled and coming from the basement. We had just turned off the lights, and no one else aside from the guard was still in the building. We tell the guard, who apparently didn't hear anything, but she basically just goes, "Nope, it's time for us to leave," and grabs her things without checking our bags. I'm wondering if I should just quit now, That really freaked me out. I'm 18, and just started my first summer job working third night shift at a factory. The other night, I was alone in the factory because a coworker was ill. It was no problem. I know what to do. Around 2:30 a.m., I went upstairs in the break room to drink some water and have a cig. Suddenly, I heard a loud knocking at the entrance door downstairs. It went on for a long time and didn't stop. I went down, thinking some drunk morons were trying to be cool. I opened the door and immediately started yelling that they should piss off. But I paused when I saw an old man standing there. He looked Middle Eastern, and I figured he was probably a refugee. He looked very old, with dark skin and a dirty, long gray beard. I asked him if he needed anything, and he started speaking Arabic or something. I told him I didn't understand, and he started making a drinking motion with his hands. I figured he wanted some water. I gestured to him that he should stay where he is, and said I'd go get him some water. He nodded, and I went upstairs and grabbed a water bottle. I turned around to go back down, and he was standing right behind me, looking terrified. I gave him the bottle and told him to get out, and he ran downstairs, really fast, like he stole something. You wouldn't think he'd be able to run that fast. He looked at least 65. I went back down to close the door and lock it, when suddenly I heard the door to the production hall slam. I felt my heart drop, as I remembered I didn't lock it when I went up. I must have spent about an hour looking for this guy, because I thought he was still there. I kept hearing strange noises, like coughing and footsteps, but I couldn't see him. And it's not really a big factory, so there's not many places to hide. After 2 hours, the weird sounds stopped. I worked about 10 more night shifts for this company, and every night I was there, I could sometimes hear the noises. My coworkers never found anything. I have no idea if he's still there. I work the audit shift at my hotel, which is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The inside is all white marble and dark wood. The hallways are dimly lit with lights every other window, and the carpet is a dark maroon. Inside the rooms, it's dark brown tile, sand-colored walls, dark wood furniture, and all the tables and countertops are made of glass. I'd say it has an old ballroom feel to it in the lobby, and the rooms are like Days Inn, but with a splash of Victorian, if that helps you visualize it better. One night, during the winter, I got a call from a room about screaming from the floor below them. Our hotel is 6 stories high. They were on the 5th floor, so that means the room they were complaining about was on the 4th. I said I would check it out for them, and I was kinda reluctant to, because as an audit, I'm the only worker in the whole building at night. Before I went up, though, I looked in the system to see if there were any rooms near them so that I could narrow it down. Here's the creepy part for me. It was in the winter, so there weren't many people in the building. In fact, there weren't any occupied rooms near their room on the 5th floor, and there wasn't a single guest staying on the 4th. I went up and investigated, and the door to the room directly under the other guests was wide open, which shouldn't be possible, being that we use a keycard system. I was thinking that maybe it was just left open by housekeeping. I looked in there to see if anyone was in there, and closed the door behind me. I told the guests from the 5th floor that it must have just been some kids running down the hall. An hour later, they said they heard screaming again, and banging below them. I went up there, and the door was open again. At this point, I treated it as a security concern, because someone had access to a room they shouldn't have, so I decided to watch the security footage from the 4th floor. In the video, you can clearly see the door open. Freakiest thing I've ever seen. I wrote a ticket to maintenance to check the door in the morning, and they said it was fine. I showed the video to my boss, and he was freaked out too. We ended up moving the guests to the other side of the building because of how spooked they were. To add on to this, apparently when maintenance went up there to check the door, right before they opened it, they could hear banging in the room. When they came in, the screen door to the balcony was wide open. I don't really believe in paranormal stuff, but no one could explain what happened, and from then on, I've been really hesitant at night to go up to the 4th floor on my rounds. My manager ended up filing an incident report, just to have it on the records. To preempt my little green text, I'm a long-haul trucker. Been at it for years, and seen and heard just about anything you can think of. Driving across the states is full of weirdness, and it changes you. I've pretty much become dependent on caffeine pills, cigarettes, and whiskey. This happened about 6 years ago. I'd been driving for a while now and talked to more seasoned truckers about the road. I heard stories of travelers, figures, cars, animals that seemed to appear over and over again on long hauls. I'd always hear about the cliché black dog, but there are others too. One old-timer, still driving his original late 70s Mack truck, claims he sees an old F-100 in every state, always going the other way, always before a storm arrives. I never thought much of it, just things guys come up with to pass the time, right? I was on a particularly long drive across 20 in Texas, still 300 miles from Abilene, when I see a figure out in the scrub. It was like a shadow, watching from the side of the road, cloaked from head to toe, with no discernible features. 10 miles further down the highway, I came across a wreck. I stopped and found a couple of people dead in the front seat. The cops said they were likely drunk and ran off the road and died. I shook it off and kept going. It got harder the next few times it happened. Always that shrouded figure. Always a wreck with no survivors. I've seen it probably 36 times now. The young truckers look at me like I'm the crazy one now. Kinda funny how that comes to pass. Three years ago, I lived in a small town for a couple of months before moving to my current residence, and I made a living working at a local 24-hour convenience store. The manager was an obnoxious fatty who would always find a way to complain about everything. The place was, hands down, a total wreck. The lights would often blink, and some of the walls were stained by mold. I don't know how he managed to avoid a lawsuit. The job paid well, though, so I didn't stick my nose into it. I used to work overnight almost every week, and rarely had to attend any customers, so I would often just sit at the counter and read a book. The store was really quiet and lonely during the night, which I loved. Nothing sort of relevant happened until the very last week. Around 4 a.m., I was chilling at the counter with a book and a hot cup of coffee when a guy in a long brown coat came in. He was in his mid-40s and really shady looking, with messy hair. I was already used to the sight of these type of individuals, so I didn't give it much thought. "Good night, sir." He just nodded and headed to the aisle on the left toward the fridge, which was blocked from my view by the shelves. I went back to reading, and heard him open the fridge door and fumble around. I figured he must be in dire need of some frozen peas. After 5 minutes, he never came back, so I decided to take a look. He wasn't there, and the fridge door was half open, propped open by a milk jug. I ran back to the counter, and he wasn't there either. I'd only been away for 30 seconds. He could have rushed out from the other side of the store, but I would have surely heard the steps and the door opening and closing. I checked the whole store, even the toilet and locker room. He really was gone. I went back to the freezer, and some of the packages and bags had been tossed around, but he didn't steal anything. Upon closer inspection, I noticed there were several footprints in the thin layer of frost at the bottom. That freak got inside the freezer and walked into it. For a moment, I thought about calling the police, but I realized I didn't have anything to report other than a guy tossing things around and disappearing. I tried to contact the manager, but he didn't answer the phone. I told him about it as soon as he came through the door during the morning. His face sort of twitched in disgust, and he told me to clean it up before I left and forget about it. He also warned me not to tell anybody, lest he lose any customers. I didn't inquire any further, and nothing remarkable happened afterwards. I quit the job a week later before moving out of town. I think the guy was just a loony who was looking for some item of frozen food, made up his mind, and somehow managed to sneak out without me noticing. Another user responds, "He never left. He was inside the freezer, dude." I used to work as a corrections officer. I have plenty of really creepy stories that happened over those 5 years, but this is by far my favorite incident. I was assigned to the single-man cells wing of the jail, which is basically solitary confinement for inmates who were being punished for breaking rules. So, around 5 a.m., medical calls for all inmates that need medication to be escorted from my wing to medical to receive their meds. I pull out 2 guys, restrain them, and instruct them to face the wall and await the guard who will be escorting them. As the 3 of us are there, I begin to hear a woman crying. I was new to that jail, and didn't think anything of it. But after a while, I slowly started to realize there are no females in this wing, nor in any wing where men are. The female wing is down the hall, sealed tight with about 3 doors in between the hall and the actual wing. Besides the 3 of us, there were only 2 other males in the wing, who were asleep in their cells. I looked up at the inmates and noticed they had this kind of smile on their face as they were watching me realize what was going on. I asked them, "Do you guys hear that?" One of the inmates responds, "Almost every night, boss."